The night was calm, the moon casting a pale glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood. Emily sat alone in her living room, her fingers tapping against the keyboard of her laptop as she worked on a project. The soft hum of the air conditioner provided a soothing backdrop, creating a sense of isolation from the outside world. As the minutes turned into hours, Emily's concentration began to wane. The isolation that had once been comforting now seemed to press in on her, an eerie weight that she couldn't quite shake. She glanced towards the window, her gaze fixating on the dark expanse beyond. It was then that she noticed something odd, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. She turned her head, her heart skipping a beat. There, just beyond the window, she thought she saw the outline of a figure. Her pulse quickened, and she blinked, convinced it was a trick of the shadows. But as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she realized that someone was standing outside her window, their face obscured by the night. A shiver ran down her spine, and she felt a surge of adrenaline course through her veins. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of the situation. Was it a neighbor? A passerby? The unease that had settled over her was palpable, a growing awareness that something wasn't right. She debated whether to call the police, her fingers hovering over her phone. But a part of her hesitated. What if it was just a misunderstanding? What if she was overreacting? As seconds ticked by, the figure outside her window seemed to grow more ominous, more threatening. Summoning her courage, Emily stood up and moved towards the window, her heart pounding in her chest. As she drew closer, she could make out more details. The figure was a man, dressed in dark clothing, his face partially obscured by a hood. His eyes seemed to gleam in the dim light, fixed on her with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. She pressed her hand against the window, her voice shaky as she called out, "Can I help you?" The man didn't respond, didn't move. He simply stood there, his presence a haunting enigma that defied explanation. Emily's heart raced, her mind racing through a dozen possibilities. Was he dangerous? Was he lost? Or was he simply a figment of her imagination, a manifestation of her fears? With a trembling hand, Emily reached for her phone and dialed 911. She explained the situation to the dispatcher, her voice quivering as she described the man outside her window. The dispatcher assured her that officers were on their way, and she was instructed to stay on the line until they arrived. As she waited, her gaze remained fixed on the man outside, her heart pounding in her chest. Minutes felt like hours as the tension in the room escalated. The man's unmoving figure seemed to cast a shadow over her thoughts, a sense of dread that refused to be ignored. Finally, the flashing lights of police cars illuminated the room, their presence a small measure of relief amidst the growing unease. Emily opened the door to the officers, her voice trembling as she recounted the events of the evening. They fanned out, searching the area around her house. But when they returned, they reported that they found no one. The officers assured Emily that they would increase patrols in the area and advised her to stay vigilant. With their departure, the house seemed to settle into an unsettling silence once again. Emily locked the doors and windows, her heart still racing from the encounter. As the night wore on, Emily tried to shake off the lingering fear, convincing herself that the stranger had simply been a passing presence, a momentary interruption of her solitude. She moved about the house, trying to distract herself with mundane tasks, but the feeling of being watched remained. Hours passed, and exhaustion began to creep in. Emily reluctantly made her way to her bedroom, the shadows seeming to deepen around her. She double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, her mind racing with thoughts of the man outside her window. Could he still be nearby? Could he return? As she lay in bed, her eyes fixated on the ceiling, she felt a growing sense of vulnerability. The isolation that had once been comforting now felt suffocating, a reminder that danger could come from unexpected places. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind, sent her heart racing. And then, just as she was on the verge of drifting into an uneasy sleep, She heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like a whisper on the wind. She strained her ears, her senses on high alert. It came again. A rustling sound, like footsteps moving through the darkness. Fear gripped Emily's heart as she pulled the covers tighter around her. She listened intently, her breath held, as the sound seemed to draw nearer. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, as if someone was pacing, moving with purpose. Her mind raced through a dozen possibilities. Could it be the stranger from earlier, returning to haunt her? Could it be someone else? Someone with ill intentions? The darkness seemed to press in on her, the silence broken only by the haunting rhythm of the footsteps. Summoning her courage, Emily reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911 once again. She explained the situation to the dispatcher, her voice barely above a whisper. The dispatcher assured her that officers were on their way, urging her to stay on the line until they arrived. Minutes felt like hours as Emily lay there, her heart pounding in her chest. The footsteps continued, growing louder, more insistent. She could almost feel the weight of someone's presence, a presence that seemed to envelop her, suffocating and unrelenting. And then, just as abruptly as they had started, the footsteps ceased. The silence that followed was heavy, as if the very air held its breath. Emily strained her ears, her senses heightened, as she waited for the sound of approaching sirens. Finally, the wails of police sirens pierced the night once again, their arrival a welcome intrusion in the suffocating darkness. Officers rushed into the house, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. They searched every inch, every corner, but once again, they found no one. They assured Emily that they would continue to investigate, urging her to reach out if anything else occurred. With their departure, the house seemed to settle into an uneasy stillness. The weight of the night's events hung in the air, a reminder that danger could lurk in the most unexpected places. As Emily sat alone in the darkness, the night stretching before her, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being trapped in a web of uncertainty. The encounter with the mysterious figure and the haunting footsteps had left an indelible mark, a reminder that sometimes the most chilling terrors were the ones that walked among us in the shadows. Emily's heart raced, her thoughts a tumultuous swirl of fear and anxiety. The events of the night had left her shaken, her sense of safety shattered. She couldn't escape the feeling that she was being watched, that the unseen presence that had invaded her home was still lingering just beyond her senses. Desperation clung to her as she tried to find a way to regain control over her surroundings. She considered staying with a friend or checking into a hotel, seeking refuge from the suffocating isolation of her own house. But a stubborn determination held her ground. She refused to let fear dictate her actions. Days turned into nights, and the unsettling feeling of being watched continued to plague Emily. She installed additional locks on her doors and windows, set up security cameras around her property, and even adopted a large dog for added protection. Yet, the unease persisted, a constant reminder that the events of that night had left scars that ran deep. One evening, as Emily sat alone in her living room, her dog curled at her feet, she thought she heard a soft rustling sound coming from the backyard. Her heart skipped a beat, and she glanced towards the window. The security lights outside illuminated the yard, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. With cautious steps, Emily approached the window, peering outside. The backyard was bathed in an unnatural glow, every detail heightened by the harsh light. And then, her breath caught in her throat as her eyes fell upon a figure standing at the edge of her property, a figure dressed in dark clothing, their face hidden in the shadows. A mixture of dread and anger surged within Emily. How had this person managed to infiltrate her property once again? She moved towards the phone, her fingers dialing 911 with a sense of urgency. As she explained the situation to the dispatcher, her gaze remained fixed on the figure outside. Minutes felt like an eternity as Emily waited for the police to arrive. Her heart pounded in her chest, her thoughts racing through the possibilities. Who was this person? What did they want? The figure's unmoving presence was a haunting enigma that defied explanation. The flashing lights of police cars once again illuminated the street, a small beacon of hope amidst the growing unease. Officers fanned out across the yard, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. And then, just as before, they reported that they found no one. Frustration welled up within Emily as the officers assured her that they would continue to investigate. She felt a growing sense of helplessness, a realization that this unseen presence was always one step ahead, always eluding capture. She locked the doors and windows once more, her mind racing with thoughts of the figure that had invaded her sanctuary. As the night wore on, Emily's exhaustion gave way to restless anxiety. She couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still out there, watching, waiting. Her dog's restless movements only heightened her own unease, a reminder that even animals could sense the tension that hung in the air. Unable to bear the suffocating isolation any longer, Emily decided to confront the unknown. She moved towards the front door, her determination unwavering. She opened the door slowly, her gaze scanning the night outside. The world was shrouded in darkness, the moon offering little solace. "Who are you?" Emily's voice was a mixture of fear and defiance. "Why are you doing this?" Silence greeted her, a heavy stillness that seemed to stretch on indefinitely. Emily's heart raced, her senses heightened as she strained to catch any sound, any movement. And then, just as she was about to close the door, a whisper reached her ears, a soft, almost inaudible murmur. Her pulse quickened, and she stepped outside, her eyes scanning the surroundings. The voice seemed to come from all directions, as if the very air was carrying its message. "Remember, Emily." The words sent a chill down her spine, a realization that this encounter was no random intrusion. There was intent behind the figure's actions, a purpose that was shrouded in mystery. Emily's mind raced through her memories, trying to decipher any clues, any connections. And then, a flash of recognition hit her, the voice. The presence, it all felt eerily familiar. She closed her eyes, her thoughts racing back to an encounter she had tried to forget. An encounter that had once seemed inconsequential. With a sense of urgency, Emily turned back towards her house, her determination renewed. She needed to find answers, to confront the past that had been haunting her. The figure's message echoed in her mind, a cryptic puzzle that begged to be solved. As dawn approached, Emily knew that the path ahead was uncertain, that the truth might unveil more darkness than she was prepared to face. But the weight of the past had become too heavy to bear, and she was determined to confront the shadows that had invaded her life. With each step towards the unknown, Emily carried the courage to unravel the mysteries that had plagued her. The figure, the whispers, and the haunting encounters were all pieces of a puzzle that had led her to this moment. And as she walked into the unknown, she knew that the answers she sought might be the key to freeing herself from the grip of fear that had held her captive for far too long. The sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the world as Emily embarked on her journey to uncover the truth that had eluded her for so long. Her steps were determined, her heart filled with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. She followed the faint trail of memories and whispers, a path that seemed to lead back to a place she had once tried to forget. Her destination was an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town, an eerie relic of a past that had long been buried beneath layers of time. The house stood in silent isolation, its broken windows and decaying walls telling stories of forgotten days. Emily's heart raced as she approached, the weight of the past settling over her like a heavy fog. The memories of that fateful encounter years ago began to resurface, the encounter she had pushed to the depths of her mind, hoping to escape its haunting grip. She remembered a group of individuals, their faces shrouded in shadows, their presence inexplicably unsettling. They had spoken in riddles, their words leaving behind a lingering unease. As Emily stepped into the abandoned house, a chill ran down her spine. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the weight of forgotten memories. She moved through the decaying rooms, her gaze fixed on the fragments of the past that still lingered. It was as if the house itself held onto the echoes of its history, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. And then, in a room that seemed frozen in time, Emily found what she had been searching for, a collection of old photographs, letters, and journals. With trembling hands, she began to piece together the puzzle of the past, unraveling the lives of the individuals who had once inhabited the house. As the pieces fell into place, the truth emerged, an intricate web of connections that spanned generations. The individuals she had encountered were not strangers, but individuals tied to her own history, to a past she had tried to escape. Their actions, their whispers, all of it had been a desperate attempt to rewrite their own narratives, to undo the choices that had led them down a path of darkness. Emily's heart ached as she read the stories of their struggles, their regrets, and the choices that had bound them to a cycle of fear and desperation. The threads of their lives were woven into the fabric of her own, and the encounters that had haunted her were a manifestation of their own search for redemption. With each revelation, Emily felt a growing empathy for the individuals who had once been shadows in her life. She realized that their actions had been driven by the same fear and vulnerability that she herself had experienced. The lines between victim and aggressor blurred, and she understood that the darkness that had invaded her life was a reflection of the darkness that had consumed them. As Emily emerged from the abandoned house, the weight of the past still heavy on her shoulders, she felt a sense of closure she had never thought possible. The encounters, the whispers, and the haunting presence had finally found context, a place within the tapestry of her own history. The journey had been one of self-discovery, a realization that the monsters in the shadows were often born from the same fears that plagued our own hearts. The individuals who had once been menacing and mysterious were now individuals whose stories resonated with her own struggles. Walking away from the abandoned house, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced her own fears, confronted the past that had haunted her, and emerged stronger, unburdened by the weight of the unknown. The world seemed brighter, the shadows less menacing, as she carried the lessons of her journey with her. The figure that had once been a source of fear and uncertainty had become a symbol of the shared human experience, a reminder that the echoes of the past could shape our present, and that understanding, empathy, and connects to breaking free from the cycle of darkness. As she returned to her own home, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The once isolating darkness had transformed into a source of empowerment, a testament to her resilience in the face of fear. The scars of the past would always remain, but they were no longer a prison instead. They were a testament to her strength and the enduring power of the human spirit.